الحمد لله الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض ولم يتخذ ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك وخلق كل شيء فقدره تقديرا. يا أيها النبي إنا أرسلناك شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا وبشر المؤمنين بأن لهم من الله فضلا كبيرا ولا تطع الكافرين والمنافقين ودع أذاهم وتوكل على الله وكفى بالله وكيلا. وتوكل على الحي الذي لا يموت وتوكل على العزيز الرحيم الذي يراك حين تقوم وتقلبك في الساجدين إنه هو السميع العليم. والصلاة والسلام على الأشرف الأنبياء إمام المرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها والنفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات
اللهم صل على محمد.
Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah, all praise belongs to Him. We've gathered here once again to resume our Jummah gatherings. We invoke Allah today sincerely through this gathering to guide us all onto the straight path, His path, the Sirat al-Mustaqim, the path of those who came previously with the true message of Allah, the Kitab, and not the path of those on whom Allah's anger or displeasure was evoked, and definitely not of those whom strayed from the Sirat al-Mustaqim. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. Assalamu alaikum and Jummah Mubarak. I'm very honored, humbled to be speaking up here. Alhamdulillah, all grace belongs to Allah. And I'm invoking Allah to guide my speech today to be in line, in cohesion with the Ahsan al-Hadith, the best narration, the best speech, which is the Holy Quran. Inshallah, you can clarify my thoughts in speech. So first and foremost, it is aligned with the Quran. And secondly, it can reach the hearts of each and every one of you, inshallah. Ameen. Yawm al-Qiyamah, the Day of Judgment. It is something that is found throughout the Quran. One of the main and most prevalent themes in the Quran is Yawm al-Qiyamah. And not only do we see it in the early Makkan surahs, in which that is the major theme of the short surahs. If you've read at the ending of the Quran, the shorter surahs, they're all, majority of them are centralized around the Day of Judgment, Yawm al-Qiyamah. So not only does Allah focus His themes in the shorter surahs around Yawm al-Qiyamah, but also in the Madani surahs, which are found at the beginning of the Quran, which go into more detail about the laws and regulations for the mu'min. Also, we are visited continuously with a reminder that takes us to Yawm al-Qiyamah. You know, وَيَوْمَ يَبْعَثُ فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ شَهِيدًا. And that day when we will raise amongst every nation a witness. وَيَوْمَ تَقُومُ السَّاعَةِ. You know, the day when the hour will be set in. So Allah is trying to remind us throughout the Quran to not lose sight of this day that's going to certainly happen with yaqeen. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, he has a hadith, an authentic hadith, which says that on the day of Qiyamah, we will all be raised in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everybody's speech that day will be nafsi, nafsi. What does that mean? Everybody will say, my nafs, my nafs. And so I want to take you to a couple of ayahs in the Quran describing the Yawm al-Qiyamah, the heaviness of that day. Okay? So the first one is found in Surah Insan. At the beginning of Surah Insan, this is a Madani surah but located at the end of the Quran. At the beginning of Surah Insan, it goes over the fact that you know, those people who share their food, who give their food to the needy despite their love for it. This, among scholars throughout the Muslim Ummah, is a direct reference to Imam Ali alayhi salam and Bibi Fatima alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. when they, as we know, they weren't blessed with much in terms of material gains in this world. And the food that they were given, that meal, that one meal a day that they were given, they gave it to the needy. In spite their need, in spite their love for it. So Allah is making a reference to that. And those who give their food in Allah's way, for His pleasure, and that they fear a day, yawmin thaqila, a day that is very heavy. So they were very in touch with this Yawm al-Qiyamah that's going to come. And in another instance, Allah states about, at the ending of Surah in Surah Araf or An'am, sorry, I may be mistaken, but one of those two surahs, Rasulullah is asked in the Quran, and when will this, Sa'a set in? When will this hour, this Yawm al-Qiyamah set in? He says that the knowledge of it is only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I do know that it is a day that's going to weigh very heavily on the heavens and the earth. So this word thaqila, heaviness of that day, is emphasized throughout the Quran. Now, Rasulullah said that it's going to be a day that everyone's going to be preoccupied with their own nafs. And Allah ties that in as well to the Quran. And the first example is Surah Adiyat. At the end of the Quran, Makki Surah, it says, when the contents of the graves will be overturned, almost like toppled over, and that which is in the sudur will be obtained for examination. So in this day, what Allah is going to be concerned with is what? What's inside our chest, our nafs. He's not going to be concerned about what our resting heart rate is, what our body fat percentage is, what is in our bank account, the amount of prestige that we have with people in the world. That will be of no importance to Allah. What will be of importance is the state of this nafs that's inside ourselves. So inshallah today what I want to do is get into this aspect of the nafs. Primarily, defining it, what it means in the Quran. It's very deep. I mean, you can have a lifelong study of the nafs and you can still not understand it. This is psychology in modern day terms, modern day studies. Psychology is the study of the self. And Quran is detailed with the nafs. The nafs is mentioned in the Quran 298 times. Think about it, 114 surahs in the Quran, but the nafs is mentioned 298 times. So almost 3 times, if you average it out per surah, the nafs is, you're coming back to the aspect of the nafs, okay? So inshallah what I want to do is define the nafs, and then secondly, how we can take care of this nafs. How we can nurture the nafs, and what are the consequences if we don't do so. So now these things that I mentioned about the gifts that were given in the hayat al-dunya, right? I mentioned about our resting heart rate, the amount of money that we have in our account, the prestige that we have among us. We shouldn't take that lightly as well, as it is a gift bestowed upon us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the ending of Surah An'am, the second last verse of Surah An'am, I don't know the Arabic, but I will relay you the English of it. It states that Allah has given you khilafat in this earth. So speaking to us directly, He has made you successors now in this earth, and He has raised some of you in darajat over others. Okay, He has raised some of you in darajat means levels basically. So He's given certain people different levels from others, so that He may test you by which He has granted you, by what He has granted you. So all these gifts that we're given, let's say if we're very healthy, for example, or we're very wealthy, or we have some sort of prestige and ability to speak to people, connect to people, it should be regarded as a gift from Allah, and we should use it in the way of Allah. So the meaning of shukr basically, and kufr are opposites of each other. Shukr means a gratitude, and kufr means a rejection of Allah's gifts, not attributing it to Him. So all these gifts that we're given in this dunya, we have to use it in a way to better our what? Our nafs. So that when we stand in front of Allah on the Day of Judgment, and He obtains that which is in the sudur, in the hearts, it can be in a state close to purity. Of course, none of us will be absolutely pure, and that's where we depend on Allah's grace to give us a final purification. But we have to strive. And this word jihad, I'm going to circle around to it again. The jihad al-nafs, the jihad al-akbar, we have to strive in the way of Allah by what we have been given in this dunya to make sure that our nafs is getting purified on a daily basis. Okay? And in Surah Qiyamah, titled, the Day of Judgment itself, it says, I don't know the Arabic. بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَاذِيرًا. And indeed, on that day, the mankind will be a witness to his own nafs, no matter how many excuses he makes. So the nafs on the day of judgment will be presented in front of a man saying that, hey, you know what, this is your deeds, this is the state of your nafs. And no matter how many excuses that we make in front of Allah, we will be a witness to that truth, okay? So inshallah, the nafs, the surah that I quoted from was Surah Shams. It's a Makki surah. And near the end of what I quoted, it describes the nafs itself, right? وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. So the nafs is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His ilm, by His purpose. And Allahu alam, Allah knows everything, and we cannot decipher what goes on in Allah, but He knows exactly what's going on in ourselves. So He's made the nafs proportioned and balanced in a way to contain its fujur and its taqwa. So if you want to think of fujur, it's like an inclination towards that which wants to destroy you. You pay attention to this. It's very deep. The nafs is proportioned in a way where it wants to incline towards that poison. Okay, where it wants to reach out and get a taste of that poison, which is going to destroy itself in the end. And so Allah has balanced that with taqwa. Taqwa is mindfulness of Allah. And it's almost like that restraint that's needed when that nafs reaches out towards that poison. Okay, so this is the nafs that has been balanced in each and every one of us. At the beginning of Surah Nisa, what does it say? O mankind, all of mankind, be wary of Allah that has created you from nafsan wahid, created you from one nafs. So each one of us has this. No matter how much we want to try to deny it, suppress it, but each one of us, Allah is stating in this, is balanced with this fujur and taqwa, this inclination towards that which is going to poison us and basically hurt us on the day of judgment. So now I want to use an example that we can connect to right now, and I want to draw it back to the nafs afterwards to see the way that we can nurture the nafs. Okay. So for me, for example, 5 years ago, I've had issues with my gut. Feeling of bloatingness, discomfort, all these things that are uncomfortable to a person, right? And so number one, we have to acknowledge that we're going through some sort of discomfort when we have an issue, a health issue. And then we can seek help, to resolve it. So when I was feeling this discomfort, I saw a specialist, an expert. And he said, you know what, you gotta avoid this and this for that discomfort to go away. And here I'm gonna give you a plan to follow so that you can become whole, heal yourself, and then so you don't feel that discomfort and that kind of sickness associated with a bad gut, right? And so there are many factors involved in this. If we don't know that we're going through a pain or a discomfort, what we can do is that we can just deny it. And we can think this is normal, right? Like me feeling this bloatingness, this gas, I'm not gonna pay attention, this is normal. Until it gets to a point where it results in decapitating illness, and then we really have to seek help. Or we can acknowledge its existence and then go seek help for it, right? So for example, I went to see a specialist and he told me, you gotta stay away from gluten, dairy, and here's a plan that I'm gonna give you and you'll feel better afterwards. And so I wanna use an analogy right now of you being in a land full of smoke, like let's say Bombay or Delhi. You continuously tell me about the fact that it was so smoggy. Now, until you have something to compare it to, you'll never know that you're in smog, right? Until you know that there's a land that exists that doesn't have this smog, you'll never acknowledge the fact that you are in that smog. So what happens is that if I follow the rules of this specialist and start staying away from gluten, dairy, sugar, what happens is that slowly I'm climbing up a mountain and I'm realizing the air is fresh. I'm realizing, whoa, I don't feel that discomfort, I feel good. So what is that? That is like a proof, right? That hey, like what I'm doing is working. And then when you look down at the smoke, what will you say? Like, I don't want to go back there, right? That's what you said, like I don't want to go back to that smog. So similarly, now connecting it to the nafs, right? Our expert, our specialist is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And our manual to follow is the Holy Quran. And so it gives us a detailed plan on what to avoid, number one, from getting that spiritual discomfort. And once again, I'll connect this back to the example of the gut, right? sometimes we don't know. We don't know we're going through comfort. We think it's normal. So of course I'm talking about the spiritual discomfort right now that is associated with the nafs. That does present itself physically, but primarily it's in the nafs. And all of us feel that sometimes, that, you know what, I don't feel good inside. Like there's something inside me that needs working. And so Allah in Surah Yunus, what does it refer to the Quran as? Shifa'un lin-nas. A cure, no. Shifa'un la fis sudur. Sorry, that's what it said. A cure for what is inside the breasts. And what did we decipher earlier? The nafs is inside the breast. When Allah attains the nafs, it is from the sudur, right? The chests. So this Quran describes itself as a healing for that which is inside the chest. So I spoke about healing of the gut, right? But the Quran right now, if we follow its guideline, its plan, what it's going to do is give us a healing, a cure for our nafs. That nafs, that should be priority number 1. Because we are going to meet our Lord on the Day of Judgment, right? So Allah gives us indications of what not to do. And primarily these are referred to as sins. So He's created a boundary and He's saying, now don't go towards this thing that is going to give you discomfort in your chest. So sometimes we can't even identify that which is bringing discomfort to us, even in like a physical sense, right? Like how was I supposed to know that gluten, dairy, or sugar is causing my discomfort without the specialist, without the gut specialist telling me that? You know? And then I believed it, I took a step forward, and then the proof came to me that, hey, this is working. So I was more inclined to submit fully to the guideline and the plan of that specialist. So the Quran and Allah work in a very similar fashion. They tell us what not to do and what to do. And once we start following those guidelines, what happens is that the proof is shown to us. وَقُلْ حَمْدُ لِلَّهِ سَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ فَتَعْرَفُونَهَا وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِغَافِلٍ أَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. It says in the Quran that soon, all praise belongs to Allah, soon He will show you His signs and you will recognize them. And your Lord is not in ghaflat, He is not heedless of what you're doing. You know, so if you try to stay away from the things that Allah has forbidden you and start doing the things which He has encouraged you to do, He shows you a proof. Right? Similarly, like when I stayed away from the toxic things of my stomach, I got a proof. I started feeling better. So similarly, when we submit to Allah, we will already start feeling this regeneration of the nafs. You know, this clarity, this purity of the nafs. And it'll show in our actions, in our relations with our family, in our relations with other people. And that is the way that Allah gets us to submit. And so the fujur and the taqwa are things that are balanced in Allah's wisdom. You know, there's this inclination to go towards that which harms us. Now the way that we can get protection and the way that we can make sure that that glitter of that sin, that glitter of that transgression against ourselves is blocked off is by remembering Allah. So this is where taqwa comes in. Taqwa, as we discussed, what is it? Mindfulness and a consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very heavy. It has many branches that come out of it. Right? Salah, zakat, sawm, being good to your neighbor, feeding the poor, helping the needy. All these things are connected to taqwa, remembrance of Allah. But the primary one is salah, aqimus salah. It's mentioned throughout the Quran. So these are the proactive ways that we can get Allah to come into our heart. And if you think of our heart as the house of Allah, if it's very dirty, Allah has no space to work with. The moment we start cleaning this house up, purifying our house, Allah then comes in. He wants to come into a pure house. Or one at least who's attempting to purify his house. Right? And so when we do that, Allah comes in, He shows us the signs, and it's a process. This is why it's called a jihad al-nafs. And it says in Surah An-Kabut, وَمَنْ جَاهَدَ فَإِنَّمَا يُجَاهِدُ لِنَفْسِهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيٌّ عَنِ الْعَالَمِينَ. Whoever strives, strives for his own nafs. Allah is ghaniyun lil-alameen, which means that He is not needy of anything. So when we do something, it's not going to add anything to Allah or subtract anything from Him. So if we commit a transgression against ourselves, it's not going to hurt Allah in the least. And if we start worshipping Allah and remembering Allah and doing the things that He's told us to do, it's not going to benefit Allah in the least. Sure, there's things that He's approved and disapproved for us, but He's ghaniyun anil alameen. So in the end, what it says is be selfish. Do it for your own nafs. Because in the end, that nafs is going to be answerable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so this is the one thing, and just hear the statement, the irony in the statement. If we become selfish in purifying our nafs, it is the only thing that when you become selfish, it actually makes you selfless. Think about that for a second, right? You are trying to purify your nafs, but the moment you start doing it, you start becoming selfless. So all these things about me, my desire, my wealth, me, I want this, the ego starts to get destroyed slowly. So there's an irony in that statement. Allah saying you do it for yourself, be selfish, but in the end, that selfishness that you're doing in order to purify your nafs will have the opposite effect. Will take you away from the fujur and raise your taqwa. So inshallah, your nafs, and I'll go back to the Yawm al-Qiyamah, that day is going to come. And this is why Allah continuously reminds us to have yaqeen in that day. Majority of us, we hear it, we say, I believe in the Yawm al-Qiyamah, but how much have we reflected upon the fact that Yawm al-Qiyamah is going to happen? How much have we pondered on the fact that one day we are going to be standing in front of our Lord and He will have the register? We think AI has all these codes and it knows everything. Allah has something even more superior. And Allah has a way of examining the nafs that we can't comprehend. So the nafs will be presented, we will be a witness, as it says in Surah Qiyamah, and we will have no excuses against it. So inshallah, what we can do, and I pray for myself first and foremost, is that we can start participating in the recitation of the Quran. And not only in the recitation of the Quran, but the reflection of the Quran, and willfully starting to submit to what is written in the Quran. And this is jihad al-nafs. It's very hard to do. I'm not trying to say it's easy. I just recognize the proof so far in my life. Alhamdulillah, all praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I only recognize the proof that this is the manual from the expert in order to purify my nafs, and I've submitted to it. I've become a Muslim. But now what is left is mu'min. And mu'min is one in Surah Hujurat. It describes what a mu'min is. One who sacrifices amwalihim wa awladihim. Who sacrifices wealth and his children in the seeking nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this jihad al-nafs is very, very hard to do, and inshallah in the second portion of this khutbah, I will look at examples from the Quran and from our Ahlul Bayt to see who are these people, and to establish a connection not only to the Quran and the word of Allah, but also use these great examples presented in the Quran and in the Hadith of these great individuals who were in complete submission to this. And in turn, what did they get? A purification of this nafs that we're speaking of. Masoom, and I'll describe where that word masoom comes from, inshallah, in the second portion. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Three lots of words.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulullah wa ala alihi. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala ashab al-Husayn jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
So just piggybacking off what I spoke about in the first portion, I want to go into real life examples starting with the Quran and then leading into the Imams, our leaders, and the progeny of Rasulullah, inshallah. So when we find in Surah Al-Qasas, has anybody here gone over Surah Qasas? Yeah. Okay. So it's primarily the story of Nabi Musa alayhi salam from the moment that he was born, and his mother got inspired to put him in the river in the box, right? But then in that story, something very interesting happens. He kills a person accidentally, but still considered murder. So essentially, he does one of the greatest sins in committing murder. And what he says right after that is very interesting, and I want you to pay attention. He says, Ya Rabbi, inni dhalamtu nafsi. Think about that for a second. I have harmed myself. I have polluted this nafs of mine to a great degree. And if it's not for your forgiveness And for forgiveness, maghfirah is derived from the pre-Islamic word ghafar. And ghafar means to conceal, to hide, and to patch over, basically to heal that transgression, that pain that we have caused, that pollution that we have caused to our own nafs, right? So if you want to relate this back to the example I gave of the house, right? What do we say? Your heart is like the house of Allah. He wants to come in there. He wants to come in and do His work with you. He wants to assist you. But if that house is always dirty, you can't do it. But the moment we turn back to Allah and ask for forgiveness, what He does, He starts helping us clean that house. So what Nabi Musa did is that when he committed that murder, that act, he turned to Allah, he said that, forgive me. Inni dhalamtu nafsi, I have harmed myself. So what can we learn from this? Whenever we do a transgression, we have to realize that it's not just that we're not following the ordinance of Allah and Allah is going to be angry with us. No, we have to go first and foremost, we are committing an injustice against ourselves. Okay, we are polluting this nafs inside of us. And then when we ask for forgiveness, of course, Allah heals us. He cleans that again so that we can go back and let Allah back into our hearts. So then Nabi Musa after that says that his plea for forgiveness got accepted. And he said that because of what you have forgiven me, O Allah, I will never be a supporter of those who are kafirin, of those who don't believe in me. He's made an oath. And of course this is a tribute to Fir'aun. Because the surah deals with Nabi Musa and Fir'aun, so he's never going to support. And this is why Allah called him to the fire, made him one of the Mursaleen, the prophets, and then sent him back to Fir'aun. Because he said, I'm not going to be dhahira lil kafirin. I'm not going to be a supporter of this kafirin. So now when he reached Fir'aun, when he reached Fir'aun, Fir'aun reminded him of this. He's like, and what about the deed that you did, back when you were here? You killed someone. And what does Nabi Musa say? That was before, when I wasn't guided. My Lord forgave me, He guided me, and He made me one of the prophets, the Mursaleen. So a beautiful example there on how the transgression is against ourselves, first and foremost. And how when we do commit a sin, it's an injustice towards ourselves. But when we ask for forgiveness, Allah heals us, and He can guide us to our true purpose on this earth, which is His khilafah, His representation, His successors in this world. The second example is in Surah Yusuf with Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, in when he, it's stated to us that she inclined, the wife of the Emir, towards him, and he would have also inclined towards her had he not seen the Burhan. The Burhan is the proof of his Lord. So just like we have a proof here. The Quran is referred to as a Burhan too. Once you start reciting and submitting it, it gives you a proof that nobody else can give you. Right? Allah speaks to you. And so once he recognized that proof, he said later on in that surah that I do not detach myself from this nafs that is inside of me, that fujur that is inside. It is only through the mercy of Allah that He stopped me from inclining towards her. So now this is where I'm going to bring in the word masoom. Okay, masoom is derived from isma, and that in a noun form is one of the names of Allah. He refers to Himself in the Quran as Asim. Asim means what? The protector, the sovereign. He protects you. And so when we look at masoom, it's derived from that, from Asim. Means that these people chosen by Allah, right? These prophets, whatever, even though maybe prior into their life they weren't in a state of purity, but when Allah chose them for a mission, what He did is He gave them a complete and thorough purification. What He said is that Asim, me, I'm going to protect you. So remember when we said that nafs inclined towards that thing that wants to destroy it? It's like poison. And sometimes it's weird because it's going to hurt us, but there's an urge inside of us planted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His wisdom to go for that poison. It's very ironic, right? Why did Allah place that? It's in His wisdom, as a trial maybe, as a fitna to see which one of us is in true remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what He has given to the prophets is this aspect of masoom, which means that He's placed a barrier, okay, between that poison and the prophets and the imams, right? That barrier between that filth and the chosen ones of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So He assists them. But it's not something that comes easy. We have to remember that. These people were dedicated, they submitted their lives for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why I'm going to use the example of Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. tomorrow is his wafat. I believe it's the 25th of Muharram. Today we're on the 24th. But just to do a dhikr of him as well. You know, this person was referred to as what? As-sajjad. What does as-sajjad mean? One who is in complete prostration. And metaphorically, what is the metaphor of doing sajda? Submission. You know, so one who is in submission to Allah his whole life. And also abidin. Abidin, one who is a worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a gift given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for free. You know, it's something that we all, if there are examples, we have to work like they worked. You know, it's not like they were born with this and, you know, I can do whatever, but I'm not going to sin. No. To the contrary, it was something that they were continuously, you know, in the dhikr of Allah, and the best dhikr of Allah is the recitation of the Quran. They were in complete submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when you look at Nabi Yusuf, you know, alayhi salam, Nabi Musa alayhi salam, they got this filth repelled from them. It was like a protection. إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلُ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرُكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. You know, it means that Allah wants to, He intends to repel that filth from you, repel that poison. And in that way, being asim that He is, He chooses some people that have come before us to become masoom, in the sense that He protects them. And so if we look at in Surah A'raf, the analogy of clothing versus nakedness, right? Allah wants to give you clothing. Shaitan wants to leave you naked. And he wants to make that appealing to you. But now if you have the protection of Allah, guess what? You're constantly in taqwa, constantly in remembrance of Allah. He's clothing you more and more and more. So if you want to think of it going out to battle and you have heavy armor, and those arrows are coming at you, but they're not penetrating you. This is exactly what asim and masoom is. It's like that protection from the things that are going to hurt you, the things that are going to give you filth, the things that are poisonous to you. Okay? So going back to my gut example, like, you know, I don't like pizza, but someone assists me into making me so that when I like that pizza, that gluten stops from coming to me. This is exactly what our prophets and imams got. So this is Sahifatis Sajadiyah. This is a collection of sermons and du'as written by our fourth Imam, the son of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and the great grandson of Rasulullah. And in this, you know, if we just look at the table of contents, okay, I'm not going to go into detail of it. I'm just going to, if you have a chance, you can find a copy on this, but if you can't find a copy, you can find it on the internet as well. It has beautiful du'as that we can relate to as well. So just to give you a random example of what he has supplicated to Allah about, his supplication in seeking refuge, his supplication in seeking asylum with God, his supplication in confessions, his supplication in acts of wrongdoing, from the table of contents, his supplication when sick, his supplication against shaitan. Okay? So this is a man, as we can tell, who was in a battle, who was in a jihad al-nafs, the great battle, the jihad of the soul. By just a table of a few, there's so many here, there's 83 supplications. I just went over 5. What does it show us? He was in consistent remembrance and seeking the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seeking that asim, Allah, the protector, to make sure that because he was scared, man. You know, if you really know something is poisonous for you, are you going to be scared? If something's going to kill you, what are you going to do? You're going to run away from it, right? So he knew what these sins are going to do to him, what they're going to do to his nafs, to an extent much higher than a lot of other people, you know? Like he had taqwa. He had that awareness of Allah's divine laws. Yes, and he had the awareness of what is right and wrong, the furqan, the discernment as well. And the Quran is referred to as the discernment. So I just want to quickly go over the things he's asked for, and then inshallah I'm gonna wrap up the khutbah very soon. I just don't want to miss over anything. His supplication. Let's go over his supplication in seeking refuge, which is on page 38. O God, I seek refuge in Thee from the agitation of craving, the violence of wrath, the domination of envy, the frailty of patience, the lack of contentment, the sureliness of character, the urgency of passion, the disposition of vehemence, opposing guidance, the sleep of the heedlessness. This is very deep. If you have the time, you guys can reflect on it as well. Preferring falsehood over truth, making little of disobedience, making much of obedience. We seek refuge in thee from harboring dishonesty toward anyone, being pleased with our works, and stretching out our expectations. So this is just a sample of the things that he was asking for. Now, would he be asking for this if he's already had it? That's just a logical question I'm posing, right, to you guys? No. It was a continuous work in progress. He was on this jihad of nafs. And it's a great example to us of putting, a sort of material, a sort of thing on what it means when you are truly engaged with the ayahs, the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You never think it's enough, because there's always more purification that you can give to your nafs. That nafs that Allah will examine on the Day of Judgment. Let us learn from the examples given in the Quran of our Ahlul Bayt, of people that were on the right path. Okay? Let us not be deviated and tempted by this whisper of shaitan to lead us away from damaging our own nafs. We have to make shaitan our clear enemy, because what he wants to do is poison us. What he wants to do is kill us, kill that nafs. So on the Day of Judgment, when we stand in front of Allah, he wants us to be embarrassed. He wants it to be a day of regret. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his chosen messengers and imams hold an example for us of what Allah truly wants from us. He wants that true success. He wants that strive in him. And inshallah we can be of the ones who are guided on to the Sirat al-Mustaqim. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.